incentive is this list of unclaimed checks that he put up. So I guess we'll just start there, Mr. Birn. There's actually people out there who have stimulus checks, but never got to claim them for whatever reason. And good morning. What are some of the reasons that these checks become unclaimed?
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Sabrina. Well, obviously, we don't follow each movement on the check once they get put in the mail. But generally, I think there are two main reasons why checks come back to us as undelivered. One is that the address is either incomplete, and the address, of course, is taken from the tax return that the taxpayer files, or the taxpayer no longer lives at that address, and the check becomes undeliverable. Many of our checks appear to go to a communal PO box, to which a lot of people presumably have access. And of course, once somebody has access to a PO box or allows other people to have access to a PO box, the distribution of the mail after that is a matter between those people. So I honestly believe that those are the two biggest reasons. Things go wrong with the mail. I happened to get a check in my PO box that wasn't for me. I obviously took the step of putting it back in the mail, but not everybody may do that. I don't know how many checks are similarly misdelivered, but these things happen, and we're here to fix it.
Yeah, so you guys released the list of unclaimed economic impact payment 1 checks. That was published on your website. I know we threw it up on all of our social media properties. It's going around on WhatsApp. Are you guys also working on the list for EIP 2 and 3?
Yes, we're working on the list for 2 and 3. Of course, 3 is still being dispersed, so it's going to be a little while before we have a final list on that. But we'll move on to EIP 2, which I believe will be a little bit smaller than EIP 1. And certainly we had fewer checks back. And as taxpayers, taxpayers who managed to get their address corrected in EIP by the time they didn't receive an EIP 1 check, but managed to get it corrected before EIP 2 will certainly have the check delivered. So I'm expecting the situation to improve as we get through these 3 different payments.
I had seen that you had said that we needed to get this list out to reach out to people because some of these checks would be expiring soon. Like, how soon?
And well, it depends on the date of the check, but basically mid-July, I think, is the average date of the check, because they'll be kind of a year old. And so that's what we did. Because, refund checks, we have to keep open for refunds for 10 years, even though the check has expired. And that's why when people come and claim refund checks, we have to start with a new check. EIP is under different rules. It's under the IRS rules. So we want to just make sure that as many of those people that are due these checks actually have them in their hands.
What's the total amount on unclaimed checks for EIP 1?
EIP 1, well, I couldn't tell you just what EIP 1, but overall, including the ones that we've started to get back for EIP 3, and that, as I say, that's the moving total, is something like 12 million.
Wow.
But that, when you take into account that the actual total payment that we made out was something over 400 million, that perspective is not such a great percentage.
Yeah. And what about for EIP 2? Do you have a rough estimate?
No, I don't. We're working on it. As you know, the check, we obviously know what the total is here, but what we send out obviously doesn't have the check amount on it. So I'll let you know as soon as we've completed that. It actually takes a fair amount of time to go through these, because what it means is we have to take, these are all hard copy checks, so we have to literally transcribe what's on the envelope.
You have an idea then how long it's going to take to get the EIP 2 list out?
Oh, I'm hoping we'll get it out within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
It took about, for EIP 1, it took about 4 weeks to do it, to finally complete it. I'm sure we've got a little bit more expert at actually doing it as we go through it. But a lot of my staff are having to do it in between all the other tasks that they do, because this isn't routine.
Right. So what Mr. Birn, did it just reach a point where you guys open a door at DOA and you just, this whole avalanche of unclaimed checks fell through?
No, they come through every day. Obviously, immediately after, or 2 or 3 days after a major mailing goes out, and most of the major mailings are the beginning of the process, we do get a whole lot back. But even when I've been looking through them, even checks that were sent out in the original batch, which was like 5 weeks ago, even those start dribbling back. So there's no rhyme or reason how they come back through the mail. We just take in whatever we get and process them as best we can.
Now, I know that you guys just don't want people who see their name on this list to show up over there at DOA. There's a process, right, to avoid kind of like gathering in big crowds?
Well, we've been pretty fortunate over the last few weeks that we really haven't had long lines here. Okay. Obviously, once people actually see this list, I'm sure we'll get more applicants. We want people to come ready with their identification, which is 2 forms of identification. And if you're sending somebody else, there must be a notarized authority for the third party to pick up these checks. And some of these checks were mailed to taxpayers off island. Obviously, they may not be here because of the pandemic. So we want to make sure that their power of attorneys are properly filled out and they will be accepted by Treasurer of Guam.
Right. So if you're an inmate or detainee at DOC and you're sending someone to pick up your stimulus check that was unclaimed, then you got to have a notarized letter.
Yes. Right. Yes. That's, we must have. You can imagine the chaos if we just allowed anybody to pick up checks. I mean, how often would you come?
I'd be there right now.
What happens to the checks and the money when no one claims these unclaimed checks?
Well, it depends. For tax refunds, like I say, we have to keep the money available for 10 years. EIP comes under the IRS rules, and it's different for each of the EIP payments. And I believe, and Daphne will be able to confirm this, that any unused funds for EIP 1 have to be returned to the U.S. Treasury by the end of this year.
Okay.
You mentioned that you guys have so many different tasks that you guys are doing. Can you give an update on the ERA program?
Yes. I got an update last night, expecting you to ask me this question.
We love it when our guests prepare.
As you know, there have been 2 cycles. One that was 2 cycles for applications. One that was from March 3rd to the 26th, and one that started on May 3rd and it's still open. The first cycle, we had 2,618 applications. Haven't had that many in cycle 2. It's 134 applications. And generally, of that, roughly half are deemed to be eligible under the rules. And the rules aren't set by us. The rules are set by the federal government and HUD as to income qualifications. So we paid out so far about 1.3 million, but we're waiting and we're hoping we get it pretty quickly. We're waiting for information from the two utilities, the two big utilities, certainly GWA and GPA, as to some of their delinquent customers. And as soon as we get the information from them, there'll be more payouts. So I'm expecting that to increase pretty quickly once we get that information from GPA and GWA.
These numbers kind of sound a little low.
Yes.
So is there any sort of move or discussion?
Widen parameters, maybe?
Yeah,
or,
to kind of change the qualifications?
You're at, well, we can't change the qualifications.
No, I mean discussions with the feds to kind of review these qualifications.
Or a new program, maybe?
But you're right, they are low. I think that if you look at both the figures that have been given to us by Guam Housing Corporation and GURA, that a lot of their programs end up with very low payouts. However, for us, we noticed this too, so we're going to try and initiate an outreach. Many of the people who apply, English or tomorrow is not their first languages, so we're going to put out information in different languages, both for, some of the landlords are not native speakers either. So we feel there's a whole number of people, and I think that was kind of borne out when testing and vaccination started, that outreach was needed to these communities in order to sort of penetrate fully those communities and get them to understand what benefits are available. So starting next week, I spoke with Bernie about this yesterday. Starting next week, we're going to initiate an outreach to these communities in order that we can stimulate these applications. Because you're right, they're much lower than we expected. This is Guam, and if somebody can't afford to pay rent or a power bill, very often they will look to family to help them. And then the power bill or the rent gets paid. And that's kind of outside the parameters of a US-based program. So we're trying to work our way through that too, and try and find out how we can better help those people, because they may have paid 1 month's rent, but the next month is going to come due, and that's another message that we're trying to get out to people.
Right. Yeah, I was talking with a friend, and maybe it's anecdotal, but they were saying that they didn't qualify because they did pay the rent, but they paid the rent with money that was for other bills, because they, people are prioritizing. Okay, can I not pay the car this month because I got to pay the rent? You know what I mean? I mean, that happens even when we're outside of a pandemic.
Yes, but, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. We're trying to work our way through that. This program wasn't set up until, we didn't know anything about this program basically until March, and people have been challenged for a year to pay those rents. I don't blame them for taking whatever measures they felt necessary so that they, I know there was a moratorium on evictions, but it was hanging over their heads. So I don't blame them for looking for alternative sources, but we're trying to work our way through that too. But as you can imagine, that's a very personal thing and takes a lot of attention, but we are aware of that.
We do have a couple of other questions, and this one comes from one of our online viewers. Has the Department of Administration started the Gov Guam healthcare insurance negotiations?
Yes, we opened up the RFP. Responses were due about 10 days, or actually now 2 weeks ago. And we've started the process of evaluating those bids. Because it's a procurement, that's really all I can say about it at the moment. We've started the process, and we understand, or I certainly understand, it's a long process, but we want to get through it as quickly as possible. So that we can get, if people do choose, as a result of that negotiation, to choose to change their insurance carrier, that we can do it well before the beginning of the financial year, because it is fairly chaotic. If we had to keep it open 2 years ago because of the late decision, and that was caused by a protest. We had to keep it open beyond the beginning of the financial year, and it was very difficult to manage. So that's why we're working with all speed to try and get it done as quickly as possible.
What about, is there anything from the AG's office on the financial management system and I guess your efforts to procure a new one?
Yeah, we have, I have a meeting scheduled with them early next week. In order to resolve some of the issues that they brought up. Again, it's procurement, so I don't really feel that I can go into those particular issues, but I'm confident of being able to resolve them at the meeting we're having with the AG early next week. To me, this is really important. It's almost, you haven't yet seen some of the comments that come from the auditors under the compliance report. So they're going to come out because we've just been finalizing them. But a lot of the comments, especially the first 3 pages, relate to issues that flow from having an old system, basically, that is struggling to keep up with the higher number of transactions and the more complex transactions that we have in the system as a result of the inflow of federal funds, and actually, the higher inflow of some local funds too. But in particular, all these funds have, when they turn into expenditures, have to be properly categorized, and we need to have an up-to-date system. Just like you have an up-to-date system for your. You don't. You were talking about social platforms and things like that. They didn't exist 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, probably just on AM 30 years ago.
Bree has to punch her laptop like a Street Fighter combo to get it to work right. Like
well, brute force works sometimes.
No.
Right. Yeah.
But not in the case of a financial management system. I'm very, very determined to get an updated system. It's long overdue,
right.
And I'm looking forward to what we can do with a up-to-date system. How much easier it will make some of the tasks that the staff here at DOA have to do. And indeed, we'll get these numbers out more quickly and with more visibility.
This is something that we have had conversations about with you, Mr. Birn, over the last several months, and also with the Mayor's Council and other GovGuam agency officials that have come on the show about this delay in payment for COVID differential. And as I understand it, specifically for the Mayor's Council, the reason why they haven't gotten their COVID differential pay is because they were getting it from CARES Act funds. And so they stopped getting it in January, and, the CARES Act money has all been expended. And they haven't been able to pay anything with regard to COVID differential pay. So is that the problem, that there's no more CARES Act funds and they're being forced to use local funds?
Well, yes, I mean, it is a problem. We were given under the CARES Act, we were given 118 million, and we spent 118 million. I think I should point out, right, that many of those departments who haven't yet been paid out these sums, like you talk about, because the money was spent, perhaps should have reported their the need to pay these people. We didn't receive some of these pay sheets or claims for payment until very late. If they'd have submitted them as we instructed them to do, concurrently with the payroll, then that payment would have been recognized earlier because we would have paid it. And we wouldn't, they would have been paid out before the funds ran out. So I'm always, whether it's overtime, like Chris has been talking about, and you've been talking about for several weeks, we really want and encourage and indeed request departments to report overtime or any other payment promptly so that we can take care of it. And then it doesn't drag on, and then we don't have issues with, we don't have the funds to do it because it was spent on something else. That's just a financial fact, that if you have so much money and you spend it, then we have to obviously to look as to how we're going to pay in the alternate. And you're right, might be local funds, it might be special funds, and we're working with all these departments to work through that too.
Mr. Birn, so the governor come out and said that they're waiting until the public comment period on July 16th, or the ending of it on July 16th, for the Treasury guidance for spending the ARPA funds. Is that accurate? I mean, are we just going to hold steady and not spend anything until July 16th?
Oh, that's what the governor said. The public comment period, where I don't know that the public is going to comment, but anybody is welcome to comment.
Right.
And I'm sure all the states are going to comment on the interim final rules. That period is open until July 16th. Interim final to me sounds slightly contradictory, but I understand the intent is to issue a set of rules and ask the people that have the funds, can you operate within those rules? So what we don't want to do, and this was one of the lessons that was learned under the CARES Act, and indeed the Treasury Office of Inspector General kind of commented to this. They issued a report that if you keep on changing the rules during the course of the program, somebody is going to fall outside the parameters. And so that's Treasury this time has tried to make sure that doesn't happen. And we don't want to spend some money, right, and then find the rule has changed.
But let me ask you this, Mr. Birn.
The governor made that comment.
So if the public or the comment period ends on July 16th, don't we also have to wait for them to respond to the comments that were filed?
Yes, we do.
So
but I think we're not alone in this. So
yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of pressure on the Treasury to, and indeed, I've been on some of these conference calls with the states and the Treasury over the last 2 or 3 weeks. The Treasury is well aware of the pressure on states to pay these sums out and the need to finalize these rules as quickly as possible.
So there's a chance that it could extend beyond July 16th. That is what's going to happen.
It could. It may be that they're so efficient that on July 17th they issue the rules, but the federal government moves at its own pace. It's their money, so we just have to, we have no choice but to comply.
Right. Well, that's new.
Is COVID differential pay still being paid out since we're still in a public health emergency? Or
well, some departments have alternative federal funds which allow them to use those funds for hazard pay. But you remember, Sabrina, hazard pay now is only at the 10% for actual exposure. So the actual amount that we're incurring is much lower. But yes, where there's federal funds available to those departments because of other federal grants, we are paying it out.
So will any of the ARPA money be used to pay out some of this outstanding payments that are owed?
It could be. It certainly qualifies, so it could be.
But you wouldn't use the ARPA money until after the public comment period on July 16th?
Well, that's up to the governor. I mean, she tells us when we can start spending the money. But the intent is as I've indicated just a few moments ago. But all this money, right? Everybody understands that it doesn't do the island much good if it's sitting in the bank. We want to get it out as quickly as possible. And it may well be, of course, that the Treasury there's issues, or what I can call streamed answers to these things as we go along, because they're aware of this pressure too. So it may be that a certain category they make clear, and then we can start spending it. But it's up to the governors when these funds can be dispersed.
Okay. Bree, we're at the top of the hour. Do you want me to ask him to hold through, or
Yeah,
we're good?
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. You're good, Bree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
Chris.
Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina.
All right.
Always good to talk to you.
Always.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
Yes. Have a good weekend.
thank you, and you.
Yeah. All right. There you go, Mr. Ed Birn. Quick break, guys, and we're coming back on KUAM TV next.
Make it. We got your 6.
At 6 a.m. with the link on Breeze 93.9 FM. Bree and I connect you with all the latest news and information
What are the
you need to know to start your day.
Then check back with Guam's news leader at 6 p.m. for the day's top headlines with KUAM News Primetime.
From 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and everything else in between with KUAM Digital, we got your 6.